Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really intense, sometimes chaotic philosophy that is everywhere in modern extreme motivational culture. It's often called the warrior mindset. Now, our goal today isn't to endorse this worldview, but we absolutely want to understand it. What exactly drives this relentless, totally unapologetic approach to life, pain, and mastery? Well, let's look at the source material and find out. Okay, let's dive right into this. Right off the bat, the source material hits us with three very direct questions. What do you want? How badly do you want it? And crucially, how much are you willing to suffer? This opening immediately plunges us into the visceral reality of this mindset. Look, this isn't about gentle encouragement. It's definitely not about finding a comfortable work-life balance. It's a philosophy built entirely on the premise of absolute, unwavering sacrifice. To really get this psychology, we have to look at how it communicates. Proponents love to borrow these super intense, dramatic quotes from pop culture, like that legendary line from Breaking Bad, "I am not in danger. I am the danger." They use this to vividly establish a core theme. This mindset demands extreme self-reliance and complete dominance over your environment. In this framework, you are never the victim of circumstance. No, you are the apex force within it. Section 1. The value of suffering and finding the utility in pain. So in this worldview, suffering isn't something you just medicate away. It's actually a tool. The sources draw a very strict line here, separating pain into two distinct buckets: pain that breaks you and pain that changes you. They argue that actively leaning into the pain of progress right now is literally the only way to avoid the destructive pain of regret later on in life. And they actually tie this psychological framework directly into human biology. The argument presented here is that leaning into extreme effort has a real physiological payoff. By tackling the hardest, most grueling tasks out there, your body gets flooded with chemicals that make that immense effort feel genuinely good. It's almost like a biological hack. Enduring intense challenge ultimately leaves the body and mind feeling surprisingly soothed. And this brilliantly illustrates the crazy mental gymnastics needed to unlock that biological power. The source shares a fascinating story about a lifter trying to pull off a 500-kilo lift. A scientist told him, hey, that's biologically impossible under normal conditions. So, what did the lifter do? He manufactured an extreme psychological crisis. He completely convinced his brain that he wasn't lifting weights, but rather lifting a heavy car off his own children. By artificially triggering a genuine fight-or-flight survival response, he literally forced his human body past its perceived physical limits. Section 2. The virtue of danger. The morality of being a monster. To wrap our heads around this, the sources lean on a really classic juxtaposition. Is it better to be a warrior in a garden or a gardener in a war? The underlying belief here is that simply being harmless isn't a moral virtue at all. In fact, it's a weakness. True virtue actually requires the capacity for danger, paired with absolute ironclad self-control. This quote takes that idea to the absolute extreme. You should be a monster, an absolute monster, and then you should learn how to control it. Notice how this completely reframes the whole concept of aggression. It argues that if you are completely incapable of being a formidable, dangerous force, your self-control actually has zero moral value. I mean, you had no other option anyway, right? Strength and the capacity for danger are viewed as the necessary baseline requirements for actually being a good person. To ground all these highly abstract, aggressive concepts, the source material points us to a very real, very extreme historical figure. Look at the staggering timeline of Lieutenant General Sir Adrian Paul Gieseling Carton Douillart. He's widely known as the unkillable soldier. He served and survived the Boer War. In the First World War, he was shot in the face, the head, the stomach, ankle, leg, hip, and ear. He even famously tore off his own fingers when a doctor declined to amputate them. Then, in the Second World War, he survived 2 plane crashes and tunneled out of prisoner of war camp. But get this, the real punchline to his incredible story, and the reason he is practically a patron saint in this culture, is his reflection on his time in the First World War. He simply wrote, "Frankly, I had enjoyed the war." It's wild, but it highlights the raw, almost absurd truth of this mindset. It inexplicably thrives and even finds joy in conditions that would absolutely break ordinary people. Section 3. Ego and unkillable drive, or the mechanics of relentlessness. So what kind of psychological fuel actually sustains this exhausting level of discipline? The source material tackles this head on, asking, what role does ego play? Now, in mainstream psychology, ego is pretty heavily debated. But here, it isn't vanity. It's redefined as the raw, unadulterated determination required to achieve greatness. Think about Michael Jordan's legendary drive to separate himself from the pack. That's the kind of ego we're talking about. But there's actually a super fascinating counterbalance presented here. To keep that massive drive from turning into pure delusion, the sources contrast it with a story about the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He allegedly had a slave stand behind him, constantly whispering, "You're just a man," over and over again. This demonstrates a vital mechanism in this mindset. When you're constantly winning, you must actively ground your own self-image. You have to artificially remind yourself of your own mortality just to remain sharp and stave off complacency. So the crucial point is how this mindset is maintained on a regular Tuesday, right? It relies on unbroken, microscopic daily promises. Set a time to train. Train at that exact time. Set an alarm. Get up at that exact time. The philosophy insists you simply cannot afford to tell yourself you'll do something and then fail to execute it. Think about your own morning routine for a second. These small points of extreme accountability are the actual bricks used to build an unshakable mental fortress. Section 4. Defeating the inner enemy. Conquering the inner me. Because, as it turns out, all this intense talk about warfare and dominating the competition, it's actually pointing entirely inward. The sources define the ultimate adversary not as some external rival, but as the inner me. This is that unmotivated, tired, procrastinating version of yourself. So when this mindset talks about going to war, it's a profound reframing. The true enemy you have to conquer every single morning is simply your own human desire for comfort. To truly humanize this whole thing, the source material shares a highly specific, honestly tragic origin story. The speaker describes the pain of losing a father to cancer at age 10 and then a mother to cancer by age 19. They found themselves waking up at 5 a.m. to work heavy construction, feeling completely empty, with literally nothing left to live for. But instead of breaking, they made the active choice to give 100% toward a greater purpose. It proves how immense, devastating personal pain can actually be transmuted into an unstoppable, productive drive. Which leads us perfectly to the core paradox of this entire explainer. It's captured brilliantly in this single quote. When you go to war with yourself, you find a lot of peace. The philosophy insists that true inner tranquility is not found by relaxing on a beach or seeking out a stress-free life. Instead, profound peace is only earned through extreme internal conflict, relentless physical discipline, and holding yourself to an absolutely impossible standard. I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought straight from the source material. Are you a good guy trying to be bad or a bad guy trying to be good? It's a compelling challenge, isn't it? It forces every single one of us to deeply examine our underlying nature, our ego, and the true source of our motivations. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, stay focused, and as always, keep learning.